I figured out what happened now. Someone did this situation with the steel cabinet, got stuck, and then had to go through the sub-basement. They were probably in a hurry or being barked at. They exited through the garage, got locked out entirely, and then gave up securing the sub-basement since they couldn't get back in. So they couldn't get into the garage at all until they worked the security cards out of the security team here. Who knows how long the security team could hold up. Hopefully they were okay. Hopefully I wasn't too late. On the door, going further into the building, light was shining through the bottom of the door faintly. I wanted to be quiet, so I didn't want to try to brute force shove this heavy cabinet and risk getting attention before I was ready. I decided to get the dolly from the floor below and carefully maneuvered around all the cats, who were now very anxious to get at what was in that cabinet. I let my AR hang down and quietly carried the dolly up to the second floor. First, I got anything heavy out of the cabinet that could shift, although it was awkward to quietly get the door open while the unit was partially sideways. I then used it as leverage to prop the cabinet up, enough to where I could get under it with my fingers. Thankfully, it seemed to be maybe only 50 or 60 pounds, but huge. Using my knees, I was able to quietly rock the cabinet upright. I had to carefully also slow it down so it didn't slam its base on the floor, squish any cats, or rock back too far and slam its back against the wall. Some items resettled in there, slowly sliding back down in place as I brought the cabinet up, but overall I think I did a good job of being quiet. I used the dolly again to quietly move the cabinet back to where I thought it was supposed to be and noticed a sign. The sign said, "Please leave the door propped open for the cats." Okay, I see the problem, I thought to myself in a duh moment. I went through each drawer, having closed each before opening the next. I found some cat food dishes and some gallon water jugs. I also found their bag, cat food, and inserted a wedge for the door. And an insert wedge for the door. I quietly fed the cats, which stopped the mewing. Hopefully the cats hadn't drawn any attention, but I imagine that nobody was down here or anyone nearby had tuned out the mewing a long time ago. I couldn't do it. The little baby kitty's cries would have ripped my heart out. So, I refilled the cat's water container, which accepted the 1-gallon jugs. I heard something getting shredded and turned and flicked my flashlight on to see that the folks here prior had some makeshift cat posts. There was also a little cat-sized foot pedal that connected to a special insert in the door, so the cats could engage the latching mechanism to a tiny cat door with their paw. I reinserted it into the door how I thought it was supposed to be, then I put the dolly to the side. The cats could get back out from the inside because the pressure always pushed the door in a little bit, so they could get it open. Such engineering genius. With that done, it was time to find out what was going on here. Chapter 16, Quarantine Hallway. I looked around inside again. These were all internal doors, and thus I expected them to be unlocked. Hearing nothing from the other side, and the cats being distracted, I paused to check what the cats were doing instead of assuming. One of the cats was circling around my leg, being appreciative from the looks of it. Then the cat stopped to smell me, downloading all the information from my cat. I stopped and patted the cat on the head. The cat sninked out a claw and tugged at my pant leg, not done smelling. I waggled my leg a bit, and it held on. After a few moments, it detached and then went on its way with its mouth half open like a goof. I took a second to look at the cats, and they all appeared to be in good health, except Hungry, and all the males were neutered. That was both to keep them smart and to keep them from pottying on everything 24/7. I recalled there was a vet or two here, so they had been taking good care of the cats up until recently. I would find out what was going on right now. I checked my watch and had about a half an hour left to check in. The cats, having finished giving me its thanks, went back to its food, water, and bathroom situation. Alright, with all the cats now back to their routine, I shouldered my AR and put my shoulder to the door. A sign on the door stating, "No cats beyond this point. Fair enough." Then, with my shoulder against the wall, I twisted the doorknob and pulled the door open slightly so I could see in. Barrel first, and only looking through my optic with one eye, the light shining through from the next room illuminated no threats. The cats, still interested in their meal, stayed behind me. I entered the hallway and helped the door quietly shut behind me. There was a narrow hallway now, so that could be thought of sort of like a quarantine zone where I surmised people could take and shoo the cats back out if they needed to. I suddenly felt vulnerable, took a knee. A knee hit the floor with a bonk. How I shuffled my knee pad inserts around. They weren't great, but better than nothing. Resting on my knee a little bit more comfortable now, the brief respite gave me a second to think. This was the first quiet time and first bit of light that wasn't from my flashlight in a while. I put the last piece of beef jerky in my mouth with my offhand and then crumpled up the bag quietly, and a cat started clawing at the door, probably smelling the jerky. I tried to push the painful, shrill scraping sound out of my head. Then, to go with the jerky, I decided I wanted some water, so I quietly let my AR hang down and swung my backpack around slowly so it wouldn't rustle. I got a new water bottle out and tucked the plastic bag away so I could toss it in the garbage later. I untwisted the cap and started to drink, but did not squeeze the bottle, as water bottles were notorious for making loud crinkly noises. Right then I heard some voices and froze in the silence. Backpack still obstructing my AR, I quickly screwed the cap on my bottle and set it down to free my hands, but didn't know what to do. Either everything slowed down or I started to think really fast as the footsteps and voices got closer. I could throw the backpack off and simply prepare for a fight right then, but that seemed silly. There were no audible alarms going off, and I didn't know if I could make it to the doorway in time. I could retreat and fall back, but there was really nowhere to go, and I didn't like anywhere prior. I had been defensively wise anyway. I also didn't know who these people were. Maybe they were just innocent people walking by. Or maybe they were sick, but I didn't hear coughing. I needed to be able to defend myself, though, and so I decided to stay completely still, and if they decided to come through, I would lift my backpack up in front of me with my left hand as a shield. That would act as clearing at sorts for my 320 sidearm, which had ample capacity if they were hostile. At that point, I could throw my backpack around me again and go back to close quarters with my AR, depending on whatever situation it is at that point. Patiently as ever, I sit and wait, straining my ears, angling my head, and trying to move my jaw a little to try to listen in on the conversation. My anxiety levels raised, though, as I tried to control my sensitive hearing. My natural instinct always was to try to talk myself out of a situation. Unfortunately, with the resistance, they generally either made up their mind ahead of time or had handlers that wouldn't let them talk out of fear. It would be under the guise of normalizing hate speech or whatever, even when asking them simple questions like what the protest topic of the day was, so talking was rarely an option, which was sad because there was generally always middle ground somewhere, but oh well. In this case, I wasn't able to see who was talking to see if they were good or bad. I gave them the benefit of the doubt and remained on one knee. The group quickly passed by, making references to some strange people. I couldn't really catch what they were trying to say either way. That wasn't enough for me to decide. Did they mean the intruders, or did they mean us? We weren't strange, were we? Maybe they were new. I wasn't sure. Come to think of it, I should probably review Combo Plaza's vetting processes, just to make sure when this is all over. Maybe that's how they got infiltrated. The people on the other side of the door had walked away farther than I could hear, so I quietly swung my backpack around and knocked over my water bottle. I winced out of forgetting that it was there. I waited to feel a bunch of water everywhere in the quiet, but then I remembered and thanked myself I had taken the second to put the cap on. I finished getting my backpack on comfortably, then picked up my water bottle and wiped the dust and crud off it from the floor. Sure, there wasn't any gross floor residue on my water bottle. I took a sip and put the cap back on tight and put it back in my pocket, and then I dusted myself off. In one motion, I stood up and brought up my AR. My AR was still in pistol configuration, having its stock folded, so I could bring it in close with me to open doors. I decided to leave it this way, especially now that I was in a narrow hallway. That reminded me to wonder what time it was. I checked my watch on my left wrist. It had roughly 10 minutes left before I needed to be within radio reach to hear from the team. I really was planning on accomplishing more in this amount of time, but everyone's going to take the situation differently, so hopefully the team would understand.